This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to this special edition of NC Spin. As has become our tradition over the past few years, we're delighted to have Governor Pat McCrory come with us and talk about the year 2014 that just ended and look ahead to 2015. We want to begin by thanking the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians for hosting us at their winter meeting at the Grove Park Inn. Welcome, Governor.
It's great being back. It's great being here at the Grove Park Inn in Asheville. I'm going to get to spend the night with my wife in the Western residence.
Here's a good question, because the Senate especially has been very adversarial so far as Community Care North Carolina, CCNC. Why would our state not want to continue and expand CCNC that has proven cost savings and improved patient care? Other states are modeling what they're doing now. What's the big opposition to this?
I think some of the dilemma is we continue to have deficits and we continue to have increased spending, and people are going, wait a minute, if this, the $535 million misforecast didn't help. So they're hearing, well, if it's working so well, why in the heck is our spending increasing so much? The other major issue, and I'm speaking for them, is that we still have areas of the state that are not covered by that. And we've got to make sure we have every part of the state covered by some sort of organization. And that's one of our great challenges, is that we have some voids. And it kind of reminds me of the communications industry, with internet. We have some major areas that are not covered. And
rural areas.
Mainly rural areas. And we have a major issue with hospital care where the rural hospitals are closing. The hospital model of the consolidation, some say we don't have enough competition, and no one knows what the 5, 10, 20-year economic model is with the hospitals.
Well, here's one thing we do know, Governor. In working with primary care physicians, we're facing a shortage of primary care physicians in this country, primarily because, candidly, income levels have been static for many years for primary care physicians. What do we need to do? You talk about encouraging people to go into vocations. What do we need to do to encourage young boys and girls, young men and women, to go into primary care medicine?
Well, I consider if we have a skills gap in any profession, that means you do similar to what we do in sports. If you don't have the center you need, if you don't have the guard you need, you have to go out and recruit them and incentivize them to get into it. And you actually, if you look at recruitment these days, you start in junior high to recruit them, right? The best little kid who's playing basketball right now, all the recruiters are out there in junior high saying, this is the school for you. Well, we have to do the same thing with skills gap. If we have skills gap with doctors, with technicians, with medical examiners, with IT professionals, we've got to go out and recruit them and maybe give scholarships.
Find those kids that are good in science and...
Absolutely, and then incentivize them through scholarships and other incentives to get them into the program. And then with that scholarship, say part of that scholarship is you might need to work in a rural area of the state for a certain period of time, very similar to the military. And at the same time, and this is where I've stepped on some toes of the universities, in areas where we have an overabundance of graduates based upon the market, we need to transfer some of the resources to where we have an overabundance of, anytime I mention a profession, I read it in the newspaper, so I'm very reluctant to mention, let's just throw one out, journalist. I'm teasing. And that'll be a headline.
Well, listen,
McCrory goes after journalists.
I'm honored that you consider me a journalist.
I'm being very liberal.
I've been called worse than that.
But I know, I talk to many law firms right now. There's an overabundance of lawyers. We have a lot of kids.
How many would agree with that?
But this is not an anti-lawyer remark to the media if they're here. But there's no doubt that we have a lot of people getting their law degree and acquiring an incredible amount of debt, and at best they're becoming paralegals. And there's no way they're going to pay off that debt. Well, if our public universities are graduating the same amount of lawyers that we were 5 to 10 years ago, why? Why don't we make the adjustment in our universities and move that, because I don't have any new money, and move that to the medical school or move that to the engineering school. And then, by the way, at a certain point in time when we have too many doctors or too many engineers, we move it back to another area of scientists or
We certainly
wherever.
need that with teachers right now.
And you have to move, and our institutions aren't adapting to the marketplace changes.
Nimble enough.
They aren't nimble enough. And the students already doing that. And I've talked to the chancellors about this, and there's a little squirming, but some of them are turning around. I've read some editorials about this lately, but I'm not afraid to keep speaking up about it. I have a nephew who graduated from Carolina in business, straight A student, brilliant kid. My dad's brain skipped a generation, went down to my nephew's, and he made money for a while, and he's going back to MBA school. He got accepted to Carolina, UVA, Duke, several other schools. Guess where he picked? He got turned down at Harvard. But he's at Kellogg right now in Chicago.
Wow.
Guess why he's at Kellogg? Because they're doing it in 1 year. It's not a 2-year program. So this 28-year-old thinks differently than my generation. He does the math. He goes, let's see, I'm out of the workplace for 2 years, going to a normal school, and I lose that income, plus that 2 years is going to cost me $100,000. When I can go to 1 year, which Kellogg is thinking straight through the summer, they actually have to go to school in the summer, and I save money. He took Kellogg. Our institutions are going to adapt to the new generation of thinking versus my generation, where you go to school for 9 months, you take off 2-3 months, and it has to take 4 years to get a degree. Why? Why does it take 4 years to get a degree?
Well, the norm is it takes more than 4.
I think you're going to start seeing, at some schools we have too much of that too.
Yeah.
We have 6-year degrees.
It'd be nice if in the university system we could do
And
it.
by the way,
before.
that's 6-year degrees that are subsidized by us. Most
Yeah.
people don't realize, but an East Carolina degree or an Appalachian State degree or a Carolina degree or state degree, the taxpayers are paying for half of it. The normal college education costs $40,000 a year. The student's paying approximately $20,000. The other $20,000 are being paid by taxpayers. So if a student's taken 6 years, that's costing everybody when I could be applying that money elsewhere. And yet we've kind of just gone, oh, what the heck, 6 years, that's a rite of passage. We can't afford it anymore. We can't afford it anymore. And they're taking a slot up for someone else.
You mentioned before the consolidation of hospitals and healthcare systems. And I think that particularly among this group, there's a lot of concern about our local communities. There are a lot of rural counties in eastern North Carolina, you've spoken to this before, don't have a doc.
Yeah.
Or if they do, there's only one.
Yeah.
So the question is, should we continue to support these consolidations, these mergers of these big systems, buying up doctors' practices, or maybe put a different way, should we do something to try to incentivize, you alluded to it a minute ago, incentivize people to go practice in some of these smaller communities and incentivize some of these smaller health practices?
Well, the dilemma you have, first of all, the rural dilemma is this, and our greatest challenge in this state and this country is how do you deal with a rural town of 10 to 50, 20, 30,000 people when the largest employer is county government and the hospital. The economic model is not sustainable. So the dilemma you have is there's no one to pay the bill. And so doctors aren't going to go where the bills aren't paid. And, it's just a matter of economics. And I do think we need to have incentives. Of course, my Commerce Department's major emphasis of moving industry back to the rural areas, and that's where our major infrastructure is being built to connect to the major urban areas so the rural areas aren't often an island by themselves. So the first thing I got to do is build the economy in the rural areas. The Roxboroughs, the Tarboroughs, the Wilkesboroughs, the Wadesboroughs, you name the borough.
Well, how do you do that? I mean,
well, that's where we have the transportation plan is a connectivity plan to make sure that no rural towns on an island by itself, because they will not survive unless they're a really unique travel and tourism destination where you have natural wealth coming into it.
So you see regional partnerships here?
Have to be regional partnership. The political boundaries mean nothing. And even my 25-year transportation plan, our 25-year transportation plan, for example, Elizabeth City In the past, it's always been, well, how can we connect Elizabeth City to the rest of North Carolina? Elizabeth City's having a very tough time right now. Roanoke Rapids is having a very tough time in northeast North Carolina. Guess where our road plan is? We're connecting them to Virginia. This is coming from the governor of North Carolina, which is not really politically smart. There'll probably be a commercial about this. I'm saying your best hope.
Pat McCrory loves Virginia.
Yeah. With coal ash.
He should be the governor of Virginia.
It will be. But actually, I learned this from South Carolina. Their best opportunities to get the spin-off industry from Hampton Roads and Norfolk. And then have in the military base, same way, we got a lot of people in the military who actually live in Virginia and commute down. I learned this as mayor of Charlotte. I noticed Rock Hill, South Carolina, and Fort Mill had beautiful 8-lane highways coming right into Charlotte when I was mayor. I said, this is pretty good. All these highways, South Carolina people coming into Charlotte. Well, after a year or two, I realized they can go out of Charlotte too. And what's happening is Rock Hill recognized that their economy is dependent upon Charlotte, North Carolina. Who cares about the political boundary? Economic boundaries do not recognize political boundaries. And we have to understand that. And I recognize that as a mayor, and I recognize that as a governor. And that's why our road system actually has connectivity to Spartanburg, connectivity to Johnson City, connectivity to Hampton Roads, connectivity to Myrtle Beach. And then we got to get out of this political ego.
But you talked about this before you ever ran for governor, about the regionalization and how who we're really competing with is Atlanta and who we ought to be working more closely with.
In some ways, Atlanta might even become a partner. In fact, as mayor of Charlotte, I work with Shirley Franklin, the mayor of Atlanta. You know what our biggest hindrance in economic development along I-85 was? Because our trade was dependent on I-85. It was the Yadkin River Bridge outside of Spencer, North Carolina. There were so many wrecks, and whenever there's a wreck in Yadkin River, it affected the whole economy of Atlanta and Charlotte. So we're dependent upon each other regardless of the economic boundaries. So I got the mayor of Atlanta to write Washington a letter to please fix the Yadkin River Bridge.
I remember that.
In Salisbury or Spencer, North Carolina. We are dependent upon each other. And if you think about it, Atlanta's not that far away. And if you look at a satellite picture of the I-85 corridor from Raleigh-Durham all the way down to Birmingham, is going to be one regional economic
Yeah, I remember you
corridor.
telling about the fact that if you looked at night, at the lights, the pattern of lights, you could see the I-85 corridor all the way down to Atlanta.
Absolutely. It's going to be one metropolitan region all the way down. And that's why I look at things like mass transit, and that's why I look at other things in preparation of that for the next generation. It's going to happen.
One of the members of our audience said several of his patients or her patients worked in the film industry, and they're very concerned about the expiration of these film tax credits. In fact, they're even considering leaving the state. What's
We
going to
just
happen?
lost one today, actually.
Yeah, what's going to happen?
We're going to lose some. But the fact of the matter is, I've got to be very frank about this. We spent $80 million of cash on the film industry last year. We gave a different type of incentive to the film industry that we don't give that type of incentive to any other industry but the film industry.
Don't give it to TV shows, I know that.
We gave it to the Comedy Central, got $300,000, approximately $250,000, $300,000 for coming to the political convention in Charlotte when they were coming anyway, and they got cash. Now that's cash out of our pocket that could have gone to healthcare, could have gone to teachers, could have gone to other things. The formula was messed up. Now, Georgia is willing to give out the cash, and they're doubling down on the cash. But I've got to measure the return on investment. And this is not money they spend on taxes. This is only money they spend. And we were having to give them cash refunds. And it was getting very, very expensive. So I put a modifier in there. Now, some people want to eliminate everything. Well, we offered $10 to $20 million of grants to help that industry. But I just want to let everyone know that's cash that you're actually giving to pay for the movie. One movie got $20 million of cash from North Carolina taxpayers. You probably didn't know that from reading the newspapers. By the way, the actor got $20 million too.
They sure don't pay that to TV shows.
I remember that. I think you paid $25 for attending your show or something.
Exactly.
I don't get that anymore, do I?
No, you don't, as a matter of fact. All right,
But
is your mother in the
real
audience?
quick, our other incentives are a little bit different. Our other incentives are based upon a net return on taxes that industry pays when they come. For example, when a new manufacturing plant comes, the headline is they get $300 million of tax incentives. Well, that's based upon a 10 to 20 year period of taxes that we wouldn't have got, and we get a certain percentage of that taxes, but they won't pay as much taxes as normal. And that's the different type of formula of incentives different than what the film industry was getting. I'm a big advocate of the film industry, but it's tough for me to give one type of incentive to all other industries this way and another type to...
So are we going to review the JDIG grants, the Job Development Investment Grants?
I've got to get that right now. I might even still have to call a special session if I get a phone call today or tomorrow or the next day regarding
a client.
Several clients. Most of my time is spent recruiting clients. And
is your mother in the audience, by the way? Here's one. Do you have any desires to run for president? Maybe you should.
Don't tell my wife that. I enjoy being governor. I enjoy being mayor.
It's a very political answer. That's very good.
Most people don't give me any hope for governor in the future, much less president. So, you know. But, you know, that's okay, too. I'm enjoying the opportunity, and it's a great job, but it's a tough job. And Dr. Cummings has got a harder job than I do working for me, though. Dr. Cummings, I'd like you to stand up, because this guy is doing a heck of a job. This guy could be making a lot of money elsewhere, and you would not believe the conditions he works under. He and Dr. Voss work in a little brick building.
I asked Robin, why the heck did he take that job?
Don't bring it up. I don't want to. You know how I recruited him to be head of Medicaid was Dr. Voss and I just changed the sign on his door and put Medicaid director.
So he came in.
Hope he wouldn't notice. He's got the hardest job in North Carolina, in addition to his boss. It's harder than being governor because they've got 16,000 employees, and the DHHS budget is a $20 billion budget. The pay for my DHHS secretary, and she only accepts $1 a year, is $131,000 a year, running a $20 billion budget. That's a bigger budget than any university, any department, and most corporations. And the pay is $131,000 a year. $20 billion, 16,000 employee department. Is it 16,000, is that right? Almost 17,000. And then they have to hire people, nurses, who are getting paid less than nurses at the hospitals are paying. And then we're trying to find people who do autopsies right now.
Oh my goodness.
Which is when Aldona Voss came up to me in my second month as governor and said, "Governor, we got a problem. The hospitals are going to quit doing autopsies for the state." And I went, "What do we have to do with autopsies?" I had no idea. She said, "Well, if someone dies in one county, but they live in another county, the state's responsible for the autopsy." Did y'all know that? That's state law. So if I die here today, the state does my autopsy. And then we pay $100 to the person who does the autopsies. And my secretary came to my office and says, you know, hospitals, they can't find someone to do it for $100.
Governor, we thank you for your willingness to come before the people and talk about issues in which we're all interested. I think and I hope I speak for all the citizens of this state in saying that we hope you and our state have a sensational 2015. Thank you, Governor. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.